working on the Vette this morning. What we're going to do is install what they call the high 4 mod. And that lets your low beam headlights stay on at the same time your high beams are. And if you're familiar with the C5 Vettes, they have kind of weakish headlights. I improved mine a lot by just putting more modern halogen bulbs in it. They have some brighter ones than what had come out with the stock, and that helped a bunch. But this high 4 mod, which I've already done to the car, really helped a bunch, because what you can do, is what I did, was raised the angle of the low beam slightly. Because I didn't really have any major problems with the high beam before, but the low beam was kind of weak. So with the high 4, I've raised the low beam slightly to where it works really well. And then when you turn on the high beam, they might be a little high, but since the low beam stays on, it just brightens the whole field out in front of you. So to me, if you're going to keep the stock headlights, this is a must-do modification. And I'm surprised I hadn't done this before, because like on the Buell motorcycles, they have twin headlights, and one will be high, one will be low. And that's one of the first mods you do on them, is to keep both headlights on the high beam. Just do a little rewire on it. So I'll show you what I've done on here and why I changed it up a little bit. I wasn't planning on doing a video at all, because it's a real simple install, but there was one thing I didn't like about it. It made it a lot more complicated to install, but it ends up being a lot cleaner when you're done. Well, this is all wired up and ready to go. Now what this modification consists of is a relay here, and you have a power wire that's fused, and it goes back to this battery positive post underneath this cover. You have a negative wire that runs back under here to a bolt there on the firewall, and then you have 2 wires that go into your fuse box. Now when you're on low beam, you have power through the low fuse settings. When you're on high beam, you have power through the high beam settings. And what this does is taps into both of those. So when you switch from high beam or from low beam to high beam, it cuts the power off to the low beam and puts power to the high beam. Well, they've got it tapped to where when you put power to the high beam, it activates this relay through one of these wires, and then the other wire feeds power back to the low beam side, so both of them stay on when you're on high beam. The part I didn't like about this setup is here's your post for the positive. And see, I've got the wires run underneath into the bottom of the fuse box. They're originally supposed to go in here, and you'd pull this fuse and one of these back here, and you'd use these little fuse taps. And that's got a hole on the bottom. You stick a leg of the fuse through there and poke that down into the fuse box. But I just didn't like it. I'm sure this works, and it is real easy to install, but the fuse didn't set down in there straight. And I just didn't like the setup. And then you take the fuse box cover, you've got wires running through there. So what I did was ended up taking the fuse box off and wiring the 2 control wires into the bottom of it. So I'll show you how to do that now. The first thing you want to do is take out your positive and negative battery terminals, take out the bolt down there, and remove your battery. All right, the battery's out of there. And I'm doing this in pretty much reverse order because I already have it installed, but it's real simple to install. The ground wire hooks up right there, coming off the relay. And then your positive hooks in right here. So we'll take that loose. Now I mounted the relay down here onto the post that holds the fuse box in. And it wouldn't set in there because of the way the fuse box, so I got another nut and put it on top. So there's the nut that holds the box down, then there's the relay, and then the nut on top of that. I did have to use a file and file out the hole on the relay. It was a little bit small to fit over that post. But once it's in there, I think that looks pretty good. So I'll take this off and take this off, get it out of the way. And I found it a lot easier to work on this without this insulator piece here. So there's a body clip here that just pops out. Then there's one here. I can't remember if that's original or if that's one I put in, but this style you pop the center up and then pull it out, and then this whole thing will lift up out of there. Now we can start working on the fuse block assembly itself. There's a 10mm nut down in this hole. It needs to be loosened up. Don't have to take it completely off. And then this other nut that you've already removed there. And we should be able to lift this assembly up. Okay, there's 4 tabs working around that hold this upper part to the lower housing. We'll pop those loose. And now I got the whole fuse box assembly lifted up, tilted back. Now this lower shroud does not come off there real easy. So what I did was snipped this section right here to split it, and now I can just peel that all the way off of around there and get it out of the way. And it doesn't hurt a thing, because when it clips back in, it holds it in place. You can't see it. Just makes it easier to get access to the wiring. And now that lets us pop this off. And you can take this whole assembly out now. Now this is where the change that I made comes in. Alright, to wire this up, coming out of your relay, you've got a yellow and a white wire. And this is if you're using the high 4 harness from Corvette Envy. Some of the other brands might have a different wiring color, or if you just decide to wire up a relay yourself, you have to figure out what's what. But on the Corvette Envy, the yellow one is the wire that feeds power back into the low beam circuit. And it needs to be tapped in to this gray wire here that goes up to your low beam fuse. And the way you figure out which one it is on here is this deal is laid out in a grid pattern. And it's labeled A, B, C, D, E. Okay, so you want position D and then 1, 2, 3 up. So D3 is for your yellow wire for the low beam. And what I did was just cut the insulation off the wire there, wrapped the yellow wire around it, soldered it in place, and put some black tape on it. Nice and solid setup. The high beam that triggers the relay is a white wire, and it needs to be hooked to wire in spot D10. So A, B, C, D, and then count up 10. And it is a light green wire right here. Same deal, spliced into it and taped it up, a little solder, it's good to go. If you get confused on the grid pattern, there's a screw right here in the middle of this. You can undo that screw that pulls this whole panel here out, and then everything is labeled underneath the whole A, B, C, D, and the 1, 2, 3. So you can easily figure out which one is D3 and D10. But that's what you're looking for. Low beam goes on D3, high beam goes on D10. You solder those in there, and then you basically put everything back together, and it's good to go. The wires go underneath the fuse box instead of up in the top. Everything looks clean. You don't have to worry about ever having a connection issue with the fuse taps. And I think it's just it's a more labor intensive way to install it, but it's a cleaner way. Oh, and one last thing that's good about pulling this out is this area here doesn't look too bad now, but I drive the car and that whole area was absolutely filthy. Dead bugs, lots of dirt. Gives you the opportunity to clean that area up, make sure everything's got a good connection, try to head off problems in the future. So that's another plus for taking this apart and wiring it up this way. But either way you go about it, I think it's a good modification. I really like the headlights better now, and if you're going to run stock headlights, this is a must do, and it's easy to install. Like and subscribe is always appreciated, and thanks for watching.